Di ba't ang sarap maging malaya? Makakagala ka kung kailan mo gusto. Makakapag-surf ng mga bagong ideya. Sky's the limit, ika nga. Pero sa totoo lang, malaya na nga ba talaga tayo? O nagpapalit-palit lang ng mukha yung mananakop? Dahil ang pagiging malaya ay hindi lang nakikita sa kakayahan mong magreklamo ng hindi nakukulong, sa kapasidad mong makuha ang bago o makasakay sa uso. Ang tunay na paglaya ay nasa pagkakaroon ng malawak na kamalayan, sa kakayahang umunlad ng hindi naman nalulumpo sa kakatrabaho, sa kakayahan mong makasabay pagdating sa oportunidad. Be all you can be ayon sa mga kano. Dahil kung sila ay may American dream, tayo dapat meron din. Pero bakit parang ang pag-unlad sa atin ang hirap matamasa? At kung madali, bakit parang nakalaan lang sa iilan? Saan nga ba nadiskaril ang dapat sana ay tuluyan nating paglaya? Yung sama-sama. Kung tutuusin, nagkaroon naman tayo ng magandang simula. Nang umigpaw ang kamalayang Pinoy. Nagising tayo sa katotohanang meron tayong iisang lahi, iisang bayan, na tayo ay Pilipino at atin ang Pilipinas. Yun nga lang, mula doon, iba-iba na ang naging diskarte. Nagsasama-sama lang muli tayo, nagkakaisa ng damdamin, pag may kalaban. Sa hinaba-haba ng kasaysayan, pagkatapos maitawid ang ipinaglalaban, kanya-kanya na muli ng pakikipag-unahan, kanya-kanyang pag-aabuso sa napanalunan, simula lider hanggang ordinaryong mamamayan. Sari-sariling diskarte sa pagyaman, walang pakialam kung may matapakan. Para bang masaya pa sa ugaling gulangan, at talo-talo na pag di na mapakinabangan. Paano nga ba natin nasisikmura ang magpakapusog sa ambisyon habang milyon-milyon ng gutom? Ang manira imbis na bumuo. At kung may nagawa man, bitin. Paulit-ulit na lang ba? Ang nakasanayan sa politika, yun at yun din. Hibang, di ba? May tawag dyan, political insanity. Ano bang napapala natin dito sa lumang paraan? Sa panandaliang palakpakan at plastikan sa tuwing tayo'y kinaiingitan? At ano na ang nangyari sa tinatawag nating bayanihan? Maraming katanungan, pero lahat ito maliliwanagan kung iigpaw muli ang kamalayang Pinoy. Isang bagong kamalayang Pinoy kung saan nananaig ang tamang paraan, kung saan una ang bayan dahil ang may malawak na kamalayan ay namumuhay ng may konsyensya, ng may pakialam sa kapwa. Kasi alam niya mga umaangat na mag-isa madaling mahila pababa. Pero pag sabay-sabay ang pag-unlad, nagkakaroon ng suporta mula sa kasama. Mahigit 100 taon na mula nang magising ang ating kamalayang Pinoy. Pukawin muli natin ito ngayon. Tandaang walang bansa at lahing maunlad ang nakatikim ng kasaganahan nang hindi ito pinaghihirapan, nang hindi ito pinagkaisahan. Tama na ang kahibangan sa yaman at kapangyarihan. Nakakasawa na. Magbago na tayo. Imbis na political insanity, political unity. Pag-ugnayin at ipagpatuloy ang maaayos na programa kahit nagpapalit tayo ng leaders. Imbis na mangarap para sa posisyon, mangarap para sa bayan. Imbis na siraan at gantihan, pagkakaisa. Imbis na dungis ang iwan, tangal. Imbis na mas malaking problema, solusyon. Para walang napag-iiwanan, para hindi tayo magpamana ng kahihiyan. Matuto tayong tumahak sa tamang daan at pagkaisahan ang pagbabago. Gaano man kasikip ang kalsada, kung sama-sama, kayang gumawa ng bagong daraan. Pansin mo, pag nanood ka ng concert, ang lakas ng dating. Ibang enerhiya pagsama-sama. Pagsama-sama, maraming ideya. Pagsama-sama, malawak ang pangunawa. Pagsama-sama, may paninindigan. Pagsama-sama, kayang-kaya. Kaya makibahagi sa pagbabago. Yan ang daan sa paglaya, kung saan lahat makikinabang. Lahat nasa tamang daan. Lahat umaalalay sa isa't isa. Nagagawa naman natin ito, di ba? Yan ang tulong-tulong. Sama-sama. Bakit hindi natin araw-arawin? Bakit hindi natin panindigan? Ngayon na, ituloy na natin ang paglaya. Paigpawin ang bagong kamalayang Pinoy. Buuin ang isang Pinas. Now na!
Pilipinas kong mahal, ang puso ko at buhay man sa iyo'y ibibigay. Tungkulin kong nagampanan na lagi kang paglingkuran. Ang laya mo'y mapantayan, Pilipinas kong mahal. Ang bayan ko'y tanging ikaw, Pilipinas kong mahal, ang puso ko at buhay man sa iyo'y ibibigay. Tungkulin kong nagampanan na lagi kang paglingkuran. Ang laya mo'y mabantayan, Pilipinas kong
We shall now begin the convention program proper.
By the power and authority vested in me by the National Directorate of the Katipunan ng Kamalayang Kayumanggi KKK Party and the recognition of this convention, I hereby call our session to order. Mr. Secretary General, please call the roll and recognize the delegates who are present.
Mr. Chairman, there are 156 delegates present from 15 regions of the country, representing 141 affiliate organizations. There is a quorum for the convention to officially conduct its business.
Duly noted and recorded, what is the first order of business in the convention agenda?
Moved, Mr. Chair, to recognize Mr. Noel Valdez of Ilocos Norte and former Executive Secretary of our keynote speaker in the CONCOM, to introduce our guest of honor.
Mr. Valdez is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the convention,
Thank you very much, kasamang Noel, sa inyong ginawang pagpapakilala. Let me clear the deck by greeting the official dome of the Katipunan ng Kamalayang Kayumanggi, led by Attorney Charlie Serapio, its founding elder, and the Secretary General, Amor Mostralis. I also greet all the delegates to this convention. Delegates coming from Metro Manila, Luzon, Visayas, and as far as Mindanao. Mga kasama at mga kababayan, let me congratulate the Katipunan ng Kamalayang Kayumanggi Political Party as it holds its national convention today. I take it that you will be participating in our national elections to be held in May 2022. Observers of our political odyssey concur in the opinion that our coming election may determine the rise or fall of our decaying democracy. With your leave, allow me to discuss the various challenges to our democracy today. Let me start with the history of democracy and the development of its different phases. In its first historical phase, democracy was immediately dismissed as a government of the mob by the early philosophers like Plato. And so the idea immediately evaporated from the face of the earth for a long time, indeed for 1,000 years. Democracy, however, was not to remain in the graveyard forever. The resurrection of democracy and its second historical phase started around the 10th century. In its resurrected form, it slowly took the shape of representative democracy, or the indirect rule by representatives of the people. But even in its resurrected form, it took representative democracy up to the early years of the 21st century in order to prevail. Along its difficult and tortuous way, democracy has to break down all accretions of antipathies to the notion that the people are truly sovereign. And these antipathies came from powerful secular and sectarian forces. They came from kings who refused to give up their royal prerogative to rule the people by virtue alone of their bloodline. They also came from theological tyrants who claimed infallibility beyond the spiritual realm. They also came from dictators who hallucinated that they knew everything and could order everyone around. It took numerous national wars, regional wars, and 2 world wars for representative democracy to beat the last of the isms, that is communism. Even then, in the course of navigating its history, democracy metamorphosed into several variants. Democracy has appeared dressed as aristocratic democracy, as a social democracy, as Christian democracy, and as socialist democracy. But there is no doubt that today, democracy is the dominant form of government throughout the world. By the end of the 20th century, 119 out of a total of 192 countries could be called electoral democracies. And they cover 38% of the world's population. That is why no less than the Nobel Prize winner, Amartya Sen, considers democracy as, quote, a universal value. For more than 100 years, we Filipinos have been aspiring to become a full democracy. And so as we prepare for the coming elections, this 2022, we should ask ourselves the tormenting question: how does the world view our state of democracy? Freedom House is a US-based non-profit, non-partisan organization that supports democratic change, monitors freedom, and advocates for democracy and human rights. Every year, it evaluates the state of freedom all over the world. And they categorize countries as free, not free, and partly free. For so many times, and for the nth time, the Philippines has been rated only as partly free and not as a fully free democratic state. This has been the sorry story of our democracy. Since we won our independence from Spain, we have exerted robust efforts to establish a democratic regime in our country, not only as a theoretical construct, but as a reality on the ground. We made that covenant in the Malolos Constitution, as well as in our 1935, 1973, and 1987 constitutions. But after a century of efforts, our dream to establish a democratic state is turning out to be a frustration, indeed a cruel delusion. Hence, as we prepare for the 2022 elections, I wish to invite you to focus on some of the reasons why we have not solved this perennial problem besetting our democracy. First, consider the kind and the quality of our representative democracy. In a representative democracy, the people elect the officials who will govern them. Election, therefore, is the life force of a representative democracy, for through the proper choice of rulers, it avoids the unwieldiness of a democracy where the people rule directly. But it is also its Achilles heel. For through elections, the government can be captured by a small elite that promotes its selfish interests and disregards the bigger interests of the people. Hence, the electoral process in a democracy must meet some irreducible requirements. For one, the conduct of elections from beginning to the end must be free from any form of unfairness, protected from any species of fraud, and insulated from any degree of discrimination. Unfortunately, the evidence that our electoral process has failed to pass this basic criteria cries to high heaven. Our elections are highly driven by money, sometimes even by dirty money. Today, the estimate is that a presidential candidate needs 50 billion pesos to have a decent run for the position. And undeniably, our elections are also controlled by political dynasties. Political dynasties that continue to monopolize power in almost all our electoral units. Political dynasties are poison to the principle of majority rule, which is the essence of democracy. Political dynasties choke the access to political power by the people in the same way the old monarchs and the modern dictators claim the exclusive franchise on the right to rule. Hence, political dynasties result in a government of the few and a government for the few. These dynasties fail to produce governments that can be trusted to look for the overlook. Secondly, I submit that we can never attain the full status of full democracy unless we respect with the unfailing fidelity the rule of law. In unadorned language, the rule of law simply means that those who govern the people must be under the law, for no one is above the law. And history teaches us that the rule of law is the sine qua non for democracy to start. And it is still the sine qua non for democracy not only to start, but for democracy to survive. As well pointed out by almost all political scientists, and I quote their findings. From the start, the state must be organized on the basis of the rule of law. Those who govern must be accountable to the people. The transparency of the governing process must permit the citizenry to keep a watchful eye on government officials in order to detect corruption and punish those who perpetrate it. Corruption can strangle a democracy at any stage of its development. Legislatures must have real law-making powers, as well as the right to hold the executive up to scrutiny. The judiciary must be independent of political manipulation by the executive and legislative branches. And the military must abide by the rules of democratic government and accept civilian control. End of their findings. Sad to state, the rule of law is weak in our country. It has a spine that is as strong as the spaghetti. Lawlessness reigns king in various levels of society. Lawlessness rules in our streets where simple traffic rules are not enforced. Lawlessness has also reared its ugly head in some branches of government, where not infrequently the fidelity given to the constitutional principle of checks and balances goes no further than a salivary salutation. When the sanctity of these touchstone principles is trust, the inevitable result is the eruption of corruption. Third, I submit that if we want to qualify as a full democracy, there are certain democratic norms which we must satisfy. These norms provide democracy's moral content, and undeniably, among the norms that command the highest importance are equality and inclusiveness. The norm of equality demands that human rights must be equally distributed and guaranteed to everyone. The norm of inclusiveness requires that economic progress should not be restricted to the rich, but should include the poor, for democracy cannot thrive on the poverty of the many. Studies on democracy overwhelmingly show that, I quote, wealthy and upper middle income countries tend to be democracies and semi-democracies. And conversely, poor countries tend to be semi-authoritarian. End of quote. In the case of the Philippines, democracy rests on a foundation of sinking sand because it has a missing middle class. And worse, the galloping gap between the rich and the poor is getting more unconscionable and more intolerable. The statistics say that in our country, 4 million families own nothing, while the top 50 families own everything. We do not need the omniscience of the divine to make the warning that our democracy cannot succeed where you have a multitude of people with heads without roofs, with backs without shirts, with stomachs without food, with feet without shoes. It hurts that millions of our countrymen migrate to other nations and risk all the maladies of maltreatment in order to escape the more virulent economic miseries in our country. Today, democracy is going through its third historical stage. From direct democracy to representative democracy, and to what the writer John Keane calls monitory democracy. Monitory democracy means a democracy where those who govern are monitored by the people moment by moment. This has come about because of the declining trust of people on their elected and unelected representatives. Hence, the metamorphosis of representative democracy to monitory democracy, where watchdogs, guard dogs, and barking dogs of all kind keep a watchful eye on their representatives and agents in government. The emergence of a monitory democracy is patent in our 1987 Constitution. It is the reason for the establishment of such independent bodies as the Commission on Audit, the Commission on Human Rights, the Office of the Ombudsman, an independent judiciary, and an interventionist civil society. Our Constitution recognizes that the people are the ultimate watchdog of their own interests. For this reason, our Constitution redesigned our state not only as Republican in character, but democratic in its essence. It again stressed and re-stressed that sovereignty resides in the people and all government authority emanates from them. In other words, it considered the people as the son of sovereignty, while their representatives are merely the moons that reflect the people's sovereignty. And it is for that reason that the Constitution gave the power to the sovereign people to remove through recall some elected officials. The reason why the Constitution gave to the people the power to enact local and national laws, and the reason why it gave the power to change the Constitution itself to the people, a power which, for all intents and purposes, is the power to create and recreate government itself. I keep on stressing that the Constitution merely affirmed and did not grant the sovereign power of the people. For in truth, the sovereignty of the people is inherent in them as a people and cannot be granted by any piece of paper, even if the tissue of a paper is called a constitution. The power of the people as sovereign preceded and antedated all man-made constitutions. There is no power higher than the sovereign power of the people, as all other powers are merely delegated by the people. Hence, the delegated power to execute laws given to the chief executive, the delegated power to enact laws given to Congress, the delegated power to interpret laws given to the Supreme Court cannot be used nor abused to nullify the sovereignty of the people. And to further fortify the power of the people, the 1987 Constitution made it the duty of the military to protect the people whenever they exercise their sovereign power. Let me end by saying that we will never be a full democracy unless and until we fully enthrone our people as the real sovereign in our country. If democracy has not flowered in the Philippines, it is because the people have been betrayed by some of their so-called representatives time and time again. If democracy has not been deeply rooted in our soil, it is because it has often been hijacked by a small but powerful cabal of political and economic elite. In other words, the story of democracy in the Philippines is the story of betrayals after betrayals of the interests of the people. Democracy will succeed in the Philippines only and only if we can stop these betrayals. Let us begin the task itself with ourselves, for we are the people. Mabuhay ang Katipunan ng Kamalayang Pilipinas, and may God bless us all.
Mr. Chief Justice Reynato Puno, on behalf of the Katipunan ng Kamalayang Kaibanggi KKK Party, we thank you very much for being the moral beacon, inspiration, and champion of our cause. Mr. Secretary General, what is next in our order of business?
Mr. Chairman, we will now proceed with the presentation, reading, and ratification by consensus and acclamation of the Omnibus Resolution approved by the National Directorate and adopted by the representative of affiliate organizations. Resolution number 001-2021. Number 1, the National Directorate, in a meeting called for the purpose of formalizing the decisions made in its discussion on 18 July 2021, 5 August 2021, and 24 August 2021, approved and ratified the following. Number 1, resolution authorizing the party's founding elder, Attorney Carlos G. Serapio, to engage, negotiate, and broker terms and conditions of cooperation with other political parties, movements, groups, or other associations under presidentiables and candidates, temporarily designating him as party chair. Number 2, the appointment of Brother Villamor Amor Mostrales as Secretary General and Brother Rodolfo Banjo L. Francisco as Deputy Secretary General.
Mr. Secretary General, is there any other business to be conducted by the convention?
The last item in our program and agenda is the address and call to action by the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. With the kind indulgence and permission of this august body, please allow me to make this shout out as our millennial generation calls it. Mr. Chief Justice Renato Puno, President on leave, Councilor Joel Parr, President Faisal Mangondatu, and the other officers of the National Directorate, honorable delegates, the Deputy Secretary General Banjo Francisco, and the Secretariat who work hard for the success of this convention, guests, ladies and gentlemen. Greetings of peace and love. Pax Christi. Life is a series of choices and decisions. Ang buhay ay isang patuloy na paglalakbay ng pagpili at pagpapasya. Ang bawat hakbang ay ginagabayan ng ating isip, puso, at mga pinahahalagahan sa buhay. Our heart, mind, and values are our tools in discerning and making our choices and decisions in life. A simple and graphic illustration is that of a girl torn between romantic and pragmatic love. Ang tanong niya, ang pipiliin ko ba ay yung tinitibok at nagpapalukso na aking puso o yung magbibigay sa akin ng kasiguruhan at ng saganang buhay? Maganda sana kung nasa isang manliligaw lang ang sagot, datapwat hindi laging ganito sa totoong buhay. Ang ating pagpili at pagpapasya ay tumatahak sa magkakasalungat na landas ng tama o mali, tuwid o baluktot, totoo o kasinungalingan, liwanag o dilim, pagbabago o pagpapanatili, buhay o kamatayan. Mas masakit pa kung ang pagpipilian ay kapwa mali, baluktot, kasinungalingan, o yung nagpapanatili sa kadiliman at patungo sa kamatayan. Kung 6 na dekada na natin itong ginagawa, mula 1965 hanggang sa ngayon, uulit-ulitin lang ba natin ang ganitong pagpili at pagpapasya? Kung ang paulit-ulit, paikot-ikot, pabalik-balik na pagpili at pagpapasya ay ganoon pa din ang magiging bunga, itutuloy ba natin ang ganitong kabaliwan, kahangalan at kahibangan? Susundan lamang ba natin ang arok ng nauunawaan ng ating mga kaisipan at gagawin yung kaya lang ng ating katawan? O palilipa rin ba natin ang ating kamalayan para tuklasin natin ng may buong pananampalataya ang kapangyarihang nakaluklok sa ating kalooban na naghihintay lamang ng ating pagkilala at pagtanggap para bigyan tayo ng lakas na ilagay sa ating mga kamay ang ating kapalaran? Hindi ba natin nakikita ang pangako ng bukas sa ating hanay? 400,000 noong 2016 ang nagsabi na gusto na nilang iwanan ng kasalukuyang kaayusan. Tumalon at umigpaw ito noong 2019 sa bilang na 7 milyon ng mga nagtiwala sa ipinakita ninyong pag-asa ng pagbabago. Ito ba ay babaliwalain na lamang natin at tayo ay susuko sa kaisipang dahil wala tayong material o pinansyal na kakayahan, tayo ay titigil na lamang para tapakan at tadyakan ng kabayong itim at kainin ng walang laban ng sistemang ating ginagalawan? O gagamitin ba natin hindi ang pantaong kaalaman, kundi ang karunungan ng dakilang kapangyarihan na nasa atin para isalamin ang pagpapastol sa pag-ibig na isinabuhay ng kanyang pagpapakasakit? Kung si Kristo Nazareno ang hari natin at ang lupaing ito ang kanyang kaharian, ang unang kapangyarihan na ating maipapakita at maibabahagi ay ang kanyang Sermon on the Mount, na siyang ating panimulang salita na lalangkapan natin ng gawa. Ang dakilang pag-ibig ng Diyos ay ang tanging lakas na pagmumulan ng maalab at matapang na pag-ibig natin sa bayan, na kayang hamunin ang anumang balakid sa ating paglaya sa sistemang piitan na sumisikil sa ating mga pangarap. Mangangahas ba tayong umigpaw sa ibang kaayusan at pamamaraan? Kung layon natin tumawid mula sa lumang sistema tungo sa bagong balangkas ng kapangyarihan, mula sa unitarianismo papunta sa federalismo, 4 ang prinsipyo na dapat nating tindigan. Una, human dignity, ang karangalan at saligang likas na karapatan ng tao. Pangalawa, stewardship, ang pangangalaga sa lahat ng yaman at biyaya para sa kabutihan ng lahat at hindi pag-aangkin ng kahit sino man bilang pag-aari nito. Pangatlo, subsidiarity, ang pagtugon at paglutas ng suliranin mula sa pinakamababang pagkakahanay-hanay ng antas na pinagmulan nito. Pang-apat, solidarity, ang pagkakaisa ng kabuuan. Sa ibabaw ng lahat ng ito ay ang pananampalataya natin sa dakilang lumikha. Mabibigyan lamang ng buhay ang mga prinsipyong ito ng isang arkong sasakyan, ng isang kilusan at partido na ang mga sumasagwan tungo sa daungan ng pagbabalik ng kapangyarihan sa taong bayan ay ganap na umiibig at handang magpakasakit. Kung ang sigaw natin ay ayoko na, paano tayo gagawa ng sariling entablado, kwento at palabas? Ngayon, sa konbensyon na ito, inalis na natin ang tabing at tinaas natin ang telon para sabihin, sawa na ako, na ang pinanunood ay iyon at iyon din, ang kawali at ang palayok, ang kabayong itim at kabalyerong hineteng puti, kwadrang mabaho at madilim, asong nauulol sa katatahol ng pare-parehong daing. Paulit-ulit na kabaliwan, kahibangan at kahangalan. Sa halip, handa ba ang bawat isa sa atin na isigaw, gagawa ako ng sariling palabas, ng sariling kasaysayan. Tayo ang mga pastol ng tunay na pagbabago sa lipunan. Hindi tayo si Juan Tanga o Juan Tamad. Tayo ay si Juan Kalikasan at si Juan Orasyon, sagot sa sarili nating panalangin. Pinapakilos ng dakilang kapangyarihan at kalooban sa diwa ng igpaw ng pagbabago ay nasa katotohanan na ang pag-ibig sa Diyos ay pag-ibig sa bayan. Ito ang hamon sa atin. Mga katipuneros, manindigan tayo. Nakaguhit na ang ating pangarap sa anyo ng isang bagong saligang batas. May libo-libong manggagawang handang itaguyod ito. Ang kailangan na lamang ay ang pagbuhay sa banal at dakilang espiritu ng mga mananahan nating mga kababayan sa kalooban nito para ang kanilang kapangyarihan at bayanihang pagganap ang bumuhat sa banga ng tagumpay ng kaganapan ng ating pangarap. Mga pastol ng tunay na pagbabago sa lipunan, ito ang igpaw ng pagbabago. Ang pag-ibig sa Diyos ay hindi maihiwalay sa pag-ibig sa bayan. Bilang tanda ng paninindigang ito, sabayan natin ang sagisag ng hinaharap si Xavier Tamayo, anak ng ating kapatid na si Wendell, sa pagbigkas ng preamble ng kinabukasan na inating inaasam at pinaglalaban ang Puno Bayanihan Federal Constitution. Maraming salamat po. Mabuhay ang Katipunan ng Kamalayang Kayumanggi, KKK Party, ang Kamalayang Pinoy Movement, ang bagong sistema, bagong pag-asa, ang kapatirang espiritual ng Pilipinas, spiritual government, at ang may mahigit 141 samahan ng mga mamamayan sa ilalim ng lahat ng mga kilusang ito. Mabuhay po kayong lahat, mabuhay ang lahat ng delegado sa iba't ibang rehiyon ng ating kapuluan. Isulong ang pagbabago sa diwa at spiritu ng kapangyarihan ng pinakadakilang lumalang, manampalataya, gumawa. Salamat po.
We, the sovereign Filipino people, imploring the aid of Almighty God to build a permanent and indissoluble nation and establish a just, humane, united and progressive society under a government that shall embody our shared ideals and aspirations, promote the common good, conserve and develop our patrimony, and secure to ourselves and our posterity the blessings of independence and democracy under the rule of law and a regime of truth, justice, freedom, love, equality, and peace, do ordain and promulgate the Constitution of the Federal Republic of the Philippines.